Go, Rav Mathur.
Okay, so this is the end of the book, actually. The last piece, what I'm going to read now is the end of the book. And we can maybe even do some definitions next time to finish it off. Okay. When an activity is similar to a malacha or it is a precaution against committing it. When the activity is similar to a malacha or is a precaution against committing it. An act might be prohibited if it is similar to a malacha or is a precautionary measure to guard against performing a malacha. 3 examples: evaporating seawater to make sea salt, gathering fruit outdoors even from their place of growth. It's similar to sheaf making. Second example, using a clothes brush to remove dust, which is similar to laundering. Tree climbing, which could lead to reaping, and granting a loan, which could lead to writing. And then it says a weekday activity. Certain activities are prohibited if they are of a weekday nature, even though they require only minimal effort. And there's one example here. One may not take measurements unless it is for a mitzvah, for a sick person, such as medication. So you can't measure things because that's what they say about people riding bicycles on Shabbos. Some people say you can, but it also represents a weekday activity. So that's it. So if it seems like a weekday or regular activity, then they're saying one shouldn't perform that act or activity.
I think that's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, and I think we know that we all have that type of knowledge. So okay, next time we can do some definitions, and just a couple of definitions to finish off the book. Then that's it. So then we've covered this whole book.
Wow.
Well done
to all of you and to all of us.
Well, to you and all of us. Yeah.
Well done to us.
Well done to us. Yeah.
Okay, well done. Okay, so just you should know that funny enough, today's the 15th, from tonight, it's the 15th of Kislev. So Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was the son of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he was the redactor of the Mishnah. It's his Yotzat today, or tonight. So we owe a lot to him. Okay, so just thought I'd let you guys know. All right, first thing I'm going to do is just introduce the subject at hand. Now, we learning laws about things that are under your care and jurisdiction, etc. So we're learning another law about a custodian. So it was stated regarding one who watches a lost object. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share the source on the screen where it's found in Deuteronomy. Just share my screen, guys. Give me 1 second. I haven't exactly made this an exact science, but I'm doing my best. Just give me a second, guys.
You're not a scientist, so it's expected. None of us are scientists.
Thank you. All right, so there's obviously that rule in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 1 and 2. Kevin knows the Hebrew. If you don't mind, if we can do it in English. If Gav, you want to read for a change?
If it's English, I'm your man. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
If you see your fellow's ox or sheep gone astray, do not ignore it. You must take it back to your fellow.
Perfect.
If your fellow does not live near you, or you do not, excuse me, or you do not know who he is, you shall bring it home, and it shall remain with you until your fellow claims it. Then, sorry, Damon, you move it down. I can't see the bottom.
Sorry.
Oh, there we go.
Then you shall.
Fellow claims it, then you shall give it back to him.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and then it obviously says you shall do the same with his ass, the same with the garment, with anything that your fellow loses, and you must not remain indifferent. So obviously is one of the things that we're going to discuss in that particular verse is that it distinguishes, and it's going to be relevant in the Gemara, between an inanimate object and a moving article, because your level of custodianship does differ somewhat. If the animal's got legs to move, it got lost for a reason, it escaped. So therefore, it didn't just inanimate objects. Generally, you've got less of a problem with watching it. So basically,
one question, Damon, sorry, I hate to interrupt. Sorry, it's important for me. What's the definition of your fellow? What's the definition that they use?
As prejudicial as it sounds, your fellow Jew. I don't think you had to return it to any Roman. I don't think that it extended that far. I suppose when we're living in a society where your neighbors are quality people and they happen to be non-Jewish, I don't see any reason why, if you know that it belongs to your neighbor, you can't return it to him also. And the same level of obligation would exist. You could become a Kiddush Hashem. I mean, it's a bit different to the Roman. The next thing, you give it back to the Roman and he accuses you of stealing it, and you're on trial for your life. So, we're living in different times. A lot of people have said to me that these Jews are prejudicial against non-Jews in the law, and you can see it from their Talmud. And I turn around to them. It depends if I've got an open or a closed spirit, and say, look, the reality is, if you're dealing in a time where Jews were seen as the enemy and you could kill them at will, it's not going to exactly foster our ability to want to treat you with any sort of warmth. If we're living in a time where they're adhering to the Noahide laws and to laws of morality, then the same ethical obligation applies. And if they continue to bug me, I said, you would probably fall in the category of the Romans. Just saying. All right.
Sorry,
Okay, Kabb, let's go.
How to win friends and influence people. You've got it nailed.
Yeah, they said that to JC Penney as well. All right. Let's go before this gets blown off YouTube. The Gemara discusses another law about a custodian. It was stated regarding one who watches a lost object in Devarim, chapter 22, verse 1. Rabbah says that he is treated as an unpaid custodian who is liable for damages to the article in his care only if he was negligent. Rav Yosef said he's treated as a paid custodian who is liable even if he was not negligent. So I think before we go through a tangent, what I want to do is share my screen again. And, I can get Arthur to read this time. There are 4 types of shomrim. Arthur, read.
Your mic.
You're on mute.
What? I know. I'm just moving to my other screen, so it's bigger for me. I'm old. Okay, so there are 4 types of shomrim, custodians, listed in the Torah. Exodus 26, 6 to 14. Done to the item being watched varies. The unpaid shomer is responsible only for damages resulting from his negligence. The paid shomer is responsible if the item is stolen or lost, but is exempt from liability for unavoidable mishaps. Example: an animal that broke a limb or was captured by armed brigands or died of natural causes. The borrower, who is also considered a shomer, since he is responsible to guard the item from damage during his term of borrowing, is liable for theft, loss, and unavoidable mishap. He is exempt, however, for damage to or loss of the borrowed item incurred through the item's normal use. Bava Kamma 93a, Shavuot 49a.
Okay, so perfect, mate. So what we learn there, guys, is that a paid custodian, because they're deriving benefit, has got more responsibility with regards to the object in their care. A unpaid guardian is responsible for very little, because if I turn around to you and say, listen, I'm going to Australia, please look after my stuff, You're going to say, no way, Damon, I don't want to end up in court. I need it like a hole in the head. Look after your own stuff. Get somebody else to do it. I don't want to land up in court. So then I'll say, listen, you can look after it, but I'm not really going to hold you responsible. Okay? Unless it's gross negligence. So that's reasonable. Now, when you a paid shomer, and I'm paying somebody to look after something for me, I'm expecting a good job. They're getting money for it. And therefore, if I pay, for example, for goods to be stored in a warehouse, I'm expecting them to have security to make sure that the place isn't broken into. Or if I'm in an office block and I've got office equipment there, I'm expecting that the building have decent security because I'm paying for the service. Does that make sense, guys? The borrower, you are doing a massive favor for the person, so then they're responsible for everything, even an unavoidable mishap. The thing can get hit by lightning, he has to pay back. The only time he doesn't have to pay back is if it incurs damage through normal use. What I mean through normal use, I mean you borrow a car, right? The person borrows your car, and it blows. The motor dies, but he's borrowed it for 3 hours. Do you really think if you lent him your car for 3 hours that the motor is going to suddenly cease in 3 hours? And I'm even saying if you lend it to a minibus driver, it's unlikely, and those guys have talent. You get what I'm saying? So it's got the more responsibility you have in terms of is directly proportional to the greater the benefit you receive. The more he's doing you a favor, the less you can hold him responsible. Otherwise, who's going to step up to the plate? I'm going to share my screen in one regard, and just to set the tone. Now, if you have a look, we just covered, Arthur just read Exodus Shmot chapter 22, and there's verse 6 to 14. Okay? Gavin, give it a shot, then Kevin, then Arthur, and so on and so on. Go, Kev. When a man
gives money or goods to another for safekeeping, and they are stolen from the man's house, if the thief is caught, he shall pay double.
Good.
If the thief is not caught, the owner of the house shall dispose before Hashem that he has not laid his hands on the other's property.
In other words, he has to take an oath. All right, Gavin, read.
In all charges of misappropriation pertaining to an ox, an ass, a sheep, a garment, or any other loss, whereof one party alleges this is it, the case of both parties shall come before Hashem, whom Hashem declares guilty shall pay double to the other.
In other words, they have to take an oath. Correct. Read off. Arthur.
Okay. When a man gives to another an ass, an ox, a sheep, or any other animal to God, and he dies or is injured or is carried off with no witness about, an oath before Hashem shall decide between the two of them that the one who has not laid hands on the property of the other, the owner must acquiesce and not restitution shall be made, and no restitution shall be made.
Okay.
But if the animal was stolen from him, he shall make restitution to its owner. Carry on, okay.
Kevin.
If it was torn by beasts, he shall bring it as evidence. He need not replace what has been torn by beasts. When a man borrows an animal from another and it dies or is injured, its owner not being with it, he must make restitution.
Last verse.
If its owner was with it, no restitution need be made. But if it was hired, he is entitled to the hire.
Okay, so these are the verses that discuss shomrim, guardianship, oath, etc. Because a guardian can say it was stolen from me, it was held at gunpoint, it was etc., etc. So these are ways and measures of determining levels of responsibility, depending on whether you're paid or unpaid custodian, or if you're a borrower or renter. and how that process works to validate that they're not talking nonsense. Right, now that we know that, Rabba says that basically we're dealing with a specific subject now, a lost article, a lost object. So if you basically find the lost object of your fellow, are you treated in terms of responsibility as one who is a paid guardian or custodian, or an unpaid guardian and custodian? Okay, so Rabba's view is that you basically treated as an unpaid custodian who is liable for damages to the article in his care only if he was negligent. But Rav Yosef said that he's treated as a paid custodian who is liable even if he was not negligent, which means obviously Rav Yosef holds him more liable. Okay, now why do you think, I'm going to ask you guys a question. In other words, Rav is saying that he's treated as an unpaid custodian because what benefit does he derive from watching the lost object? In other words, by definition, a paid custodian receives money, right? He receives some benefit for the performance of his duties. So somebody that found a lost object doesn't get any compensation. So therefore, he has the status of an unpaid custodian. It's a little bit easier to understand Rabbi. Rav Yosef said he's treated as a paid custodian who is liable even if he was not negligent, which means if in his care he finds it and it was stolen or it was lost, he has to replace it. So why is he treated like that? Because the opinion is, Rav Yosef said that on account of the benefit that he does not need to give bread to a pauper while he's occupied with guarding a lost object, he is deemed to be a paid custodian. How many people have done Chazorah? So I can test you. Arthur's done it with Bava Kamma.
I think I've done this, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, Arthur, what's it talking about here? Why, according to Rav Yosef, is he considered a paid custodian?
Hold on. Yeah, no, I was blanking them out. Because he's driving, no, not because he's driving benefit from it.
No, well, Rav Yosef is saying he is. It means he doesn't have to give anything to a pauper. If he is, he doesn't have to give bread to a pauper because he's occupied with guarding the lost object. What does this mean? So that's why he's deemed a paid custodian. What does this mean?
Who are you asking?
I'm asking you. I'm putting you in the spot.
Bro, I'm blank at the moment. My mind's just trying to think. What does it mean? It'll come to me in a second. I've got to think. I listened to earlier.
I'm opening it up to anybody.
Is it because he's a shepherd and that's what he usually does, and a shepherd should take it seriously?
No.
So he should be, even though he's a paid, it could be like a paid custodian because that's his job and he has to take it seriously.
So what we're saying is here, you find a lost object. There's two ways to look. You've got a level of responsibility because you have to return it to the original owner. So Rabba is saying, listen, you don't get paid for it. You have to return it to the owner, but you're not getting paid to look after it. So you're deemed an unpaid custodian, which means if you're negligent regarding it, then you have to pay. Like you found a car with the car keys in, and you take it for a joyride and you write it off, you're liable. But short of that, if you take it back home and somebody steals it from your place or gets hit by lightning or something weird happens and you're not negligent, you're not liable. But if you're a paid custodian, you're liable for loss or damage. In other words, it doesn't, it doesn't work anymore, that vehicle in your care, or it got stolen, or whatever the case may be, your level of guardianship increases as though you were a paid custodian. Rabba said you don't get anything for it, so you treat it as an unpaid custodian. So what I'm saying is, Rav Yosef seems to say that the reason that you're considered a paid custodian is you do derive benefit. And what benefit do you receive? Well, I'll tell you, because we already lost 20 minutes of the share, just to get you guys accustomed with the subject at hand, is that there's a rule that states, okay, and it's a Gemara in Sukkah 25a. It says, look, if you occupied with the performance of a mitzvah, it means you're exempt from performing any other mitzvah. Okay? So if you engaged in the mitzvah of maintaining a lost object, you're not obligated to give charity to a poor man who solicits you at the time. So since you don't have to give money to a poor man at the time if you solicited, you've saved money. And if you save money, you've made money, as the Jewish adage goes. And therefore, you're a paid custodian. Okay. Now, Rabba doesn't like that answer, Kevin. You know why Rabba doesn't like that answer? Because Rabba's figuring this, right? If the object is lost, in other words, if the guy picks up the lost object and it's lying in his possession, he's able to give charity at the same time. It's lying in his house. Maybe that moment he finds it, that exact precise second when he finds it, he's occupied with the mitzvah, but not at the point where it's at safekeeping. And he said maybe he's also involved with the mitzvah if he found an animal. He's got to feed the animal, but he's not feeding that animal 24/7 to render him off the hook from giving tzedakah because he's performing this 24-hour mitzvah. So it's just the likelihood of feeding the animal or finding an inanimate object at the exact time when a pauper's coming is so unlikely, you can't even consider that to be the reason that you're saving money by not giving to a pauper and that you're busy with another mitzvah so that you can't deal with the pauper. He's saying the likelihood of the two happening together is pretty thin. So obviously they don't like that sort of explanation. So there is another explanation. So Habura says, fine. Rav Yosef also says that it's treated as a paid custodian, for since the Torah obligates him to watch the lost object against his will, he's consequently deemed a paid custodian. So what do you mean against his will, and why does this make him a paid custodian? Well, if you look at the basic understanding of custodial obligations, right, even an unpaid custodian should be liable for theft and loss. Think about it, because it's under his care. Now, the reason he's exempt, as we discussed, is because nobody's going to take on the role. If I'm going to Australia and I say, guys, if it's in your care, you've got to look after my stuff. Otherwise, you have to replace me. You can say, listen, what do I need this in my life for? I'm bailing out. And since I'm going to say that, the only way that you would prepare to look after it is either you're going to get paid, or if you're not going to get paid, you don't need to pay out. But this is a different case. This is an order from the Torah. There is no bailing out. You understand, Kev? Everybody's falling asleep. Guys. I'm saying, Kevin, if Hashem gave you a directive in the Torah to return a lost object, deraisa,
Yeah.
it's not a choice. It's not like I'm saying, can you look after my stuff? And I'm holding you liable. You're going to say, I don't want to look after your stuff if you're going to hold me liable.
You have
If I
no choice.
give you an instruction says, if it's lost, you return it. You find it, you look after it, you return it to the owner. There is no choice. So you can't bail out of it. So therefore, you have to do a superior level of guarding, of custodianship. Why? Because we worry that when a person asks his fellow Jew is going to say no. He doesn't have any authority to order his friend to look after his stuff. So therefore, he's not going to help his friend out by looking after it if he's going to land up in court. So we say, look, if you want your friends to do you a favor at no fee, then you can't hold them liable in court because they need the headache. They don't need the headache in their lives. But when Hashem tells you to do something, you're not off the hook. And therefore, you're not given that same leniency as an unpaid custodian. You have to look after it as though it is yours, whether it gets lost or stolen or negligence. You have to look after it. If it's hit by lightning, it's about the only way you're off the hook. That's about it. And you probably have a neighbor to tell you it was storming and it's got to look crispy. The sheep's got to look really crispy. So, guys, I can tell you right now, that's Rav Yosef saying that you have to he's deemed a paid custodian in terms of his level of responsibility. So that second answer makes more sense. It's even fine with Rabba. So Rabba and Rav Yosef, they pose a number of challenges to each other. So there's a mnemonic. Remember what a mnemonic is?
Yeah.
A sentence to tell you how the next 7 arguments are going to come out. There's 7 challenges, and from 57A to 57B, right? So this is the mnemonic. He returned, comma, always, comma, returning, comma, here, comma, you say, comma, broken, comma, renter. I think it's easier just to learn the actual thing. The mnemonic isn't a time saver. Rav Yosef challenged Rabba from the following brisa. Okay, so there's a brisa that said, if the finder of the lost object returned it to a place where its owner will see it, he is not obligated to deal with it further. In other words, he's not liable should anything then happen to the object. However, if it is stolen or lost, he is responsible for it. Okay. So in other words, he doesn't have to find the owner and hand him the object in his hands. Okay. Or he doesn't even have to leave it in the owner's domain. In other words, by arranging that the owner can see the object before it suffers any damage, that suffices, and he's fulfilled his duty, and he ceases to be responsible for after that point. So say, for example, you find my bearded dragon, and you know I work in Weinberg. I've got offices in Weinberg, and you know my house is locked, and you can't get in my house, and you're not going to see me because I've gone to Durban or whatever the case. No, I haven't gone to Durban. I've gone out or whatever, and you don't know my movements or whatever. But your office is a minute away from my office. You can take it in its cage and put it on my desk at reception, either at reception or at my desk. Now, I don't own that place. It's my office where I go. But since I'm going to frequent it, you've done your duty. Okay? That's what it says. So then what happens is Rabba is using this. So Rav Yosef challenged Rabba from this brisa. He's saying to him, he's going to develop his proof now. In other words, that second part says, if it's stolen or lost, he is responsible for it. Okay? In other words, it's saying, Rav Yosef is saying, does this not mean that if it was stolen from the finder's home or lost from his home, evidently then the brisa refers to the finder as a paid custodian who is liable for theft and loss. Okay, so what he's saying is it can't mean that the object was stolen or lost from the place that he returned it. Why? Because the brisa taught that the finder isn't responsible after placing it there. So the first thing the brisa teaches is as follows. I want to go through this again with you. He doesn't have to exchange the object into the finder's hands, not the finder, the owner's hands. All he has to do is dump it on his property or in a place where you'll see it. So therefore, Rav Yosef is saying it can't be talking about the original owner's home because you're free from responsibility there. Rav Yosef isn't arguing with the brisa. He was saying then if it's lost or stolen, it then has to be in the finder's home of the object, not in the owner's home. Why? Because the minute you return it back to the owner's home, you're no longer responsible for it. So it could only be talking about the original finder's home. And therefore he's saying, if you're responsible for the theft or the loss in that case, then for sure it makes you a paid custodian. Just waiting for Arthur.
All right, disconnect.
Yeah.
Damon, yesterday's shiur, you must watch the video with the Simcha Steinhauer because he gave an answer to your question in it.
Yeah, he sent me a message. He said to me he wanted to address my question. It seems that Arthur's here.
He did address it. So go. He said this is Damon's question. He said it's pity Damon's not here. But
I always get bust, eh?
no, I was going to message you, but I thought, no, maybe you're not feeling well, Stephen.
No,
But
he
said that,
messaged me.
no, but he said that as long as somebody tells him to watch the video. So just watch the video. The answer's there. It's a very good answer he actually gets. It's a good question. It's a very good answer that he gets as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Gav. I appreciate it. All right, let's.
Somewhere in the middle somewhere, if you don't want to watch the whole thing, I think.
Thanks, Bertie. Now, I'd like to watch it properly. Okay, so sorry about that, Arthur. I don't know what happened. So, Rav Yosef.
It's fine. It's back on.
Okay. So Rav Yosef is using this Bryce as a proof for his argument. So again, I'm just going to read the Bryce just to keep up. If he, the finder of the lost object, returned it to the place where its owner will see it, he is not obligated to deal with it further. It's off his hands. However, if it's lost or stolen, he is responsible for it. Okay? Now, Rav Yosef says this doesn't make any sense unless you interpret it as the finder as a paid custodian. Why? Because he's saying, look, the first part of the brisa, we have to agree with the brisa. He's saying you take it back to the original owner's home. You no longer have to deal with it. You don't have to put it in the homeowner's hand. Then you're off the hook. So why would you be responsible if it's lost or stolen if you drop it at the original homeowner? You're done. So the only home we can talking about is the person that found the object. And therefore, if it makes him responsible for a loss or something stolen when it's in the finder's home, that means he's a paid custodian. Because a paid custodian is responsible if something is in his care while the homeowner's away. That's his proof. He's using the Bryce as his proof. Okay? Now, Rabbi defends his opinion. He said, no, that's not what the Bryce means. Rather, the intent is that the object was stolen or lost from the place where the founder returned it. Okay? In other words, what he's saying is, although Rabbi holds that a founder is an unpaid custodian, who's generally exempt from liability for theft or loss, he agrees that the finder is liable here because he acted negligently by returning the object in this manner. Okay? So what he's saying is, Rabbi is saying he is an unpaid custodian, but an unpaid custodian is responsible for negligence. And therefore, to just return it when the homeowner is not there and anybody can break in and take the object again, that's negligence. Does that make sense? So that's not a proof that he's a paid custodian. It's only proving he was negligent. And he should actually make sure that either the place is secure in terms of the original owner or that he hands it to the owner. Now, Rav Yosef objects. He said, but the Brisa taught in its first clause that once the founder returns, he is not obligated to deal with it any further. In other words, he's not liable should anything happen with it. So what Rav Yosef is saying is he's saying to Rabbi, but then you're ignoring the Brisa, because the Brisa says you're not responsible past that point. It's a good point, right?
Yeah.
So he's saying, look, he said, look, we're dealing with a special case here. When we're saying that he's responsible if it's lost or stolen, it's where he returned it in the afternoon, because there's two cases. If he returned it in the morning to a place where the owner would see it, in other words, the morning is when the owner goes frequently in and out, and he will see it shortly, you're not obligated to deal with it further. The second clause teaches if he returns it in the afternoon to a place where the owner would not see it, and he doesn't frequently go in and out, if it's stolen from that place, he is responsible for it. So how can Rabbi say that so clearly? Because, guys, we're talking in a time when we were in an agricultural society. In the morning, a man is found in his house because it's hot, okay? In the afternoon, he's at work in the fields. You don't sit there, especially if you're a redhead, cooking in the middle of the field between 12 and 2, you'll die. So, you work early in the morning and maybe late in the afternoon in the field, but not during the day. So in the reasonable part of the morning, the homeowner is at home. So then you can put an object there and the homeowner will see it upon his daily route. But in the afternoon, he's not going to return back until the end of the afternoon, so it's plenty of time from somebody to steal it from his location, and therefore that is negligence. That's not normal theft or loss. He shouldn't have left it there in that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And one last thing. How many redheads do you think there were in Roman times?
Well, I'll give you an example. David Amelech was a redhead.
Okay, that's one. Okay. And then?
Well, you couldn't have been the only one.
Well, redheads are like the most rarest things.